Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live, where web video meets the issues. Tonight, primary video as preview, what the images we have seen so far tell us about the campaign to come. Also, Burma, a U.S. official now says the death toll could pass 100,000. But could a free flow of information have saved lives?
It's troubling that many of the Burmese people learned of this impending disaster only when foreign outlets such as Radio Free Asia and Voice of America sounded the alarm.
And tonight, videophilia. Do we need national parks when everybody's hiking through cyberspace? But first, here are this week's online video picks. Number one, from the Detroit News website, not only did the Detroit City Council leader, Monica Conyers, who happens to be the wife of House Judiciary Committee Chairman John Conyers, get caught on tape screaming at the City Council president, she called him Shrek. She was then called on the carpet during a meeting with 8th graders on a field trip to City Hall.
Do you think if the president would have really got angry and took that personal, do you think that would have jeopardized your job?
No, why would it?
If it would have offended him as well as the rest of the city council, do you think they would have brought it out?
They would have done what?
Brought it out. Meaning, would they say, oh, she did this, we don't think she should have done it? Because you said we're in school and how we feel like that, but you're an adult. We have to look up to you.
Absolutely.
We're looking on TV and like, this is an adult calling another adult a Shrek. That's something a second grader would do.
And so at school, you've never done that. You've never said anything that you shouldn't have said inappropriate.
We are kids.
But that's
We're
not my
children.
question, though. Have you ever done that?
I said yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So, and you did it out of frustration also, right?
Yes.
And so we're all human, right?
We're human, but you have to know your boundaries. He's the president.
Of what?
Of the city council.
And so do you think just because someone is the president that they have a right not to allow other people to be heard?
They're allowed to let other people be heard, but not in a disrespectful way.
Okay, and he was being, to me, he was being disrespectful.
He was, but you didn't have to call him a name.
But now you're telling me what I should have and should not have done.
Well, you're an adult. You have that choice.
I'm what?
You're an adult. You have that choice.
And everybody has choices.
But sometimes people need to think before they act.
Okay, well, I'm not going to be combative with you, young lady.
Are you smarter than an 8th grader? Not that 8th grader. But Monica Conyers is not the only woman making YouTube buzz with her rants right now. Tricia Walsh-Smith has been video blogging her New York divorce and getting millions of hits. Here's a sample from her latest.
So in 2008, I am being thrown out on the street having done nothing. He's got me about $100,000 in debt. I'm having to pay lawyers. They take a $25,000 retainer. And everyone's saying, get a job. I have a job. I've worked all my life. My father died when I was 12 years old. At 15, I got a scholarship and went to stage school where I worked. I did TV. I made over 500 television commercials. I was known as the commercial queen. My first play, Bonkers, was a smash hit. So how dare you people say, get a job? I've worked my butt off all my life. I didn't marry my husband for money. I've always earned my money. And then I get abusive emails, and remember, my husband's the president of the Schubert Organization. They have 17 theatres on Broadway, and every show has a press office, and in the West End. They've all been on the thing, sending in the most disgusting, disgusting comments, trying to slag me off and slander my name. Shame on you! How dare you! If this was the 16th century, what would you have done? Put me in the stocks and thrown rotten tomatoes at me? I am speaking my truth. But I did my cards today. And look what I pulled. Courage. I will continue to speak my truth. On Monday I go to court. My husband still wants to evict me. If he does, I hope you'll all donate and help me buy a tent.
No comment. Online video pick number 3. New York's bloggingest borough will be the scene of the 3rd annual Brooklyn Blog Fest tomorrow night at 8 p.m. at the Brooklyn Lyceum. Louise Crawford, who organized the event, sent us this 30-second promo produced by Blue Barn Pictures.
The Brooklyn blog community is made up of people who are obsessed and addicted to where they live.
I feel as though I matter in my community.
We range from artists, teachers, community activists.
It's affected the way I consider my contribution to the community conversation.
It's certainly changed the experience of living in Brooklyn.
A fascinating place full of stories.
I get all the way dressed and I put on makeup and I fix my hair and everything, and then I can think and blog.
By the way, we plan to have some of those Brooklyn bloggers after the festival next week. But even some of those super Brooklyn-aware New Yorkers may have missed the cherry trees blooming at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden this spring, so the BBG packaged it up as a lapse time video. A few more years of global warming, and that might be the real-time experience. And online video pick number 5 from Idiot Sophants. What if your Facebook interactions became face-to-face?
Hello? Poke! Edward Baxter! It's me, Todd from school! Oh, we sat next to each other in maths. We didn't get on, remember? Yeah. Do you want to be my friend? What? Do you want to be my friend, confirm or ignore? All right. Great. Where did we meet? You know where we met. Do you want to skip this step? We met at school. Okay, but how about if we say we met on an oil rig and we were lovers for 50 years? That's not true. It's a joke! It's like a really brilliant joke. Can I get confirmation on that, please? No. Can I get confirmation on that, please? No. Okay, are you in a relationship? I've got to. Is it complicated? It's complicated. Okay, well, what are you looking for? Friendship, dating, whatever you can get. Let's just say random play, because that could mean anything, like really, really kinky, horrible... What's he doing? He's writing on your wall. I've written, all right, Eddie, you dickhead. Everyone can see it.
Just don't try to write on my wall, buddy. And that's our online video picks for this week. This is Brian Lehrer Live, where web video beats the issues. In his victory speech in North Carolina last night, Barack Obama, who, by the way, recently officially defriended Reverend Wright on Facebook, he really did, he assured voters last night he is not naive. He knows opponents will pounce on, as he put it, every fake controversy in hopes the media will play along, unquote. And will the media play along? Well, let's look at their track record over the primaries. Joining us, Victor Navasky. He chairs the Columbia Journalism Review, and TV producer and satirist Chris Cerf. Together they have just published Mission Accomplished, or How We Won the Iraq War. Welcome to the show. Thank you both very much for coming in.
Good to be with you.
Victor, did the media serve the voters of, let's say, Indiana
and
North Carolina? Yes.
Someone referred to the mass media as a weapon of mass distraction. And they did their best to distract people from what was going on. But in the end, I think people saw the truth. And it was a pretty interesting set of primaries.
The truth is, does that mean you're an Obama supporter?
Well, I have two hats here. One is my hat as a founder of the Institute of Expertology, who's been studying all of these people out there. And in Mission Accomplished, people have criticized us because they say that we quote Hillary Clinton saying that we'll know in a matter of 3 to 6 months whether whether the war will be won in 3 months or 6 months right at the beginning, and we quote McCain saying it'll be a matter of weeks, and we don't quote Obama. So people say, well, you must be a secret Obama supporter. But we are students at the Institute of Expertology of the experts, and everybody knows that Obama had no experience, so he wasn't an expert, so he didn't qualify for our study. Now, personally, when I'm not running the Institute of Expertology with Chris, yeah, I'm an Obama supporter.
Okay.
Don't tell anyone.
I won't tell anyone, I promise.
But I'm objective.
It's only television. Did the media serve the voters of Indiana and North Carolina?
Well, I think they always seem to serve up the horse race and try to keep the horse race interesting. And I must admit, I'm kind of addicted to that myself. I find myself going on Real Clear Politics every 5 minutes to see if the polls have changed.
Yes,
yeah.
Because, Bob Herbert wrote about this in his New York Times column the other day. He was really talking more about race than the horse race. But he says race is like pornography in the United States. The dirty stories and dirty pictures that everyone professes to hate, but no one can resist. And I think the horse race media is like that, too.
Well, it's hard to resist, but it does, as Victor suggested, cover up some very interesting stories. And, again, I think what we find with the Institute of Expertology is that when there are really big mistakes made, nobody really goes back to check, and so they're forgotten, and then people move on. So you can say the wrong thing as a pundit 400 or 500 times, and as long as it was more than 3 days ago, you're fine to be a pundit again.
And we'll get back to the war, which actually faded away as an issue in these later primaries, but quite a few concerns have been floated in the mainstream media about Obama's candidacy, some of them more bizarre than even others. Let's watch a mashup of some of the talking points used by Fox News when talking about Barack, put together by Brave New Films.
Barack Obama in a bathing suit.
The reason that he's considered such a big deal is simply because he's black.
He is a black candidate surrounding himself with a lot of white advisors.
Neither one of us can point to one thing Barack Obama has done for African Americans.
Well, first of all...
Well, nothing.
Fine, balanced journalism.
The senator's middle name, Barack Hussein Obama.
If his middle name is Hussein, what is wrong with people that bring up his middle name?
Because his father was Muslim and named him Barack Hussein Obama.
What they're doing is they're linking him with a loaded image. It's unfair to do such a thing.
Well, of course, it's patently unfair. Unfortunately, Obama's being laden with a name that causes Al-Qaeda problems.
Now, right there, see, right, you said been laden and then Al-Qaeda.
What do we really know about Barack Obama? His team works overtime trying to hide Obama's dirty little secret. He is, get this, a cigarette smoker.
He's a smoker.
Would you vote for a smoker as president?
I think the smoking issue comes back to bite him in the hindquarters.
Say, we want somebody like that in the White House.
And if that video wasn't silly enough for you, check out this of Hillary that has gotten a lot of circulation showing, well, what exactly? So, Chris, You know, that's supposed to prove that she's out of touch with the common person who actually gets their coffee out of coffee machines. But I don't think I know any common person who hasn't had a struggle like that with a vendor.
It makes me feel a bond with her, in fact, which I didn't feel quite as much a few minutes ago. But it's another example of what we were referring to before, that people go to these small things and they become huge. It's what you show a coffee machine. People around the coffee machine will talk about Hillary's inability to work one, but maybe not about, you know, the economy or how the Democrats differ from the Republicans, which is a huge issue that kind of gets lost in all this.
Why do you think campaign coverage gravitates toward the personal like that, like we saw in both those videos, rather than the issues?
Well, you know, I mean, the first video was all about Fox News, which I think is too easy a target. We take a journalist like Tom Friedman, who's very thoughtful, and he discusses the issues. So, and Tom Friedman, we have a section in the book where we look at Tom Friedman. So what he said at the beginning, he said he was for the war. He said, but we'll know in 6 months whether it's working or not. And he's looking at the issues, not person. And then 6 months later, he wrote another column and he said, you know, we're going to see if this is working in 6 to 9 months. And then 6 months later, he wrote a column saying, we should know in about 6 to 9 months whether it's working.
But since he's not, this is Tom Friedman, the New York Times columnist, since he is not shy about criticizing the administration, we played a video, by the way, a few weeks ago of McCain saying the same thing. Every 6 months, he was, we're going to know in the next 6 months. So maybe these are honest mistakes.
These are honest mistakes, but that's what they are. They're mistakes. So the point is, so I am talking to you now about a person, Tom Friedman, rather than the fact that they all got it wrong. It wasn't just one journalist. I mean, it was every major news organization, with one or two exceptions. And we say in the book that people say, well, surely, you know, didn't the Nation get it right? I worked at the Nation all these years. Say, look, the Nation is all the way over on the left. They don't count. And some of the right-wing things don't count. So we didn't count them because they would pollute our sample and they didn't count. But the mainstream media, they all got it wrong. So, and the thing about them is they're arrogant in the way they get it. Like our friend Richard Cohen, who after Colin Powell gave a speech at the UN, he said, after you heard what he had to say, nobody could doubt this man. Only a fool or possibly a Frenchman could think otherwise. So this is Richard Cohen. Pretty funny, but, you know.
Well, there are, you know, lots of quotes like that. Bill O'Reilly, our friend from Fox, said that, I will bet you the best dinner in the Gaslight section of San Diego that the war won't last a week. And again, what I was saying is, did anyone ever go back to check whether he on the bet? We did. That's the point of our book.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Fox may be a very easy target, but some of the talking heads in this campaign have gotten fed up with certain questions from all kinds of media. Here is Senator John Kerry, an Obama supporter, who took it on himself to get MSNBC back on track just last Thursday.
Okay, he said it. A 20-year relationship. Reverend Wright married him. He is the God. He was the one who baptized a godparent, in essence, to his two daughters. How personally painful is this for him?
Well, Alex, can I just say something to you? Obviously, it's painful, and he said it. But you know something? You folks need to let go of this. Television needs to stop dwelling on something that is in the past. I thought Barack Obama yesterday gave America his second big presidential moment of this campaign. The first when he spoke out about the issue of race, and the second yesterday when he made it clear every one of the statements of the minister are just unacceptable. They're not the person that he knew before. Now, let's move on to how we're going to put people to work. How are you going to give people health care? How are you going to create jobs in America? What Barack Obama is offering in this gas price issue is real leadership. I mean, do we want people who sort of put their fingers in the wind and throw out an idea for the short term that is sort of politically pleasing? Or do you want a leader who stands up and says, no, what we need is to really lower gas prices by having a real energy policy, an intelligent policy that puts in place the incentives for renewable fuels and alternative fuels. That's what Barack Obama is doing. And I think you guys have got to focus on the things that really matter to the American electorate.
If he had talked that way last time, he might have been elected.
Just what I was thinking.
There you go. But to be fair, hypothetically, if John McCain had come out of Pat Robertson's church, let's say, or Jerry Falwell's church, called him their spiritual, he doesn't say spiritual advisor, Obama, but, you know, someone who really brought him to Jesus, and named his book, his autobiography, after something that Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell said, wouldn't you at The Nation be having the same conversation over and over again about sort of guilt by association, or what this says about his character and who he's going to bring to the White House and what his values must be?
John McCain did have a relationship with a preacher that...
Well, not that intensely.
Not
He's had these endorsers, and he
I'm,
hasn't denounced them altogether. But
look, I'm not... I'll put my Nation hat on, but Nation, sure.
That's your third hat.
Yeah,
third hat.
That's my third hat.
Yeah.
It's not guilt by association to look at a relationship and try and understand it, and but to do it twice is maybe okay. To do it 3 times begins to be peculiar. To do it 20 or 30 times, and then for Tim Russert to take up the first 17 minutes on Meet the Press going over it yet again, seems to be slightly excessive. But I don't want to blame television. I mean, we have a section here on the scholarly community. And if you look at the scholarly community, let me give you my favorite example of a debate within the scholarly community. 2 leading scholars on the Iraq War, Kenan Makia, leading Islamic scholar, and Fuad Ajami.
An Iraqi dissident, Makia, who fled Saddam's Iraq.
And Fuad Ajami, who taught at the University of Johns Hopkins University. They're having a debate about how we're going to be greeted when we invade Iraq. And you tell us
I believe it was
Ajami
who said that we would be greeted by kites and boom boxes, whereas Makia felt it would be sweets and flowers.
That's the difference between the 2 leading scholars. So the scholarly community is not that much better than the mass media when it comes to rallying around the flag. And
you talked about Russert's focus. There was something of a public dust-up after the recent presidential debate when the first nearly full hour of discussion with George Stephanopoulos and Charlie Gibson on ABC was taken up by questions like these.
2 questions. Number 1, do you think Reverend Wright loves America as much as you do? And number 2, if you get the nomination, what will you do when those sermons are played on television again and again and again?
You know, the notion that somehow that the American people are going to be distracted once again by comments not made by me, but somebody who is associated with me, that I have disowned, I think doesn't give the American people enough credit.
So back to Bob Herbert for a minute. He wrote on Saturday, the challenge for the working press right now is to see if we can force ourselves past the overwhelming temptations of right and race and then focus in a sustained way on some other important matters like the cratering economy, metastasizing energy costs, the dismal state of public education, the nation's crumbling infrastructure, or the damage being done to the American soul by the endless war in Iraq.
Sounds like a good subject for some news or commentary.
And the truth is that there's nothing wrong with talking about race. If you talk about it the way Obama began to talk about it in Philadelphia, it's something that ought to be talked about. So.
And it must say something about something that Reverend Wright, according to the poll, I think by Pew, I'm not sure, but that this story was the most paid attention to of any election campaign story in this entire presidential election season. Nearly 100% awareness on the part of the American public. And you can't say that about any other issue, including gasoline prices.
Well, first of all, it certainly has excitement around it. Obviously, it's got every controversy you can think of. But as Victor said, the fact that it just got played over and over again, which was disappointing, also made it even more an awareness issue. I think there was a poll that came out last night that showed that something like 60% of the people in Indiana or North Carolina, or maybe both, thought it influenced their vote in some way.
That's right. I've got that.
Which is...
I've got that stat right here. And actually, I think this stat is very interesting because it seems to cut both ways. It certainly a negative thing for Obama in the long run. But voters who said that the situation with Reverend Jeremiah Wright was very important to their vote. In North Carolina, of the people who said that, 42% voted for Obama. So 42% of those who thought it was an important issue voted for Obama, 57 for Clinton. Yeah. You know, probably those 42% were largely African American. It was very different in Indiana, where only a quarter of those who said it was very important voted for Obama. But still, it means it doesn't just cut one way.
Yeah, but of course, by great coincidence, I have been, when I wake up at 4 in the morning, I have been reading Dreams of My Father, Obama's first book. And when you read the chapter on Reverend Wright in that book, and you hear all these things that are being said, you might well vote for Obama because of what he says about him then and what is going on now and his double response. His first response...
Are they consistent?
They're totally consistent to me, because his first response was not to throw over this guy who was so important to his life as someone who helped straighten out his head on how to think about where you come from when you have this multi-rainbow background that he comes from and set of experiences on the one hand. And then when Reverend Wright did what he did, you had to respond to it. And no matter how much you loved and valued what he had done for you before. Right. And he did both things.
But it's really about complexity, too. That's really what the media is missing in everything we're talking about tonight, is that they don't give the American public credit for being able to understand complexity, and they reduce issues to a bad pun, black and white things.
Here's an example. With all this coverage of the silly season of Democratic primaries, some things are sure to fall by the wayside. And after the initial coverage of this story in the New York Times, this media story, for example, has been widely ignored.
After revelations that military pundits like these have been secretly spinning for the Pentagon on America's network news, how are the networks themselves covering the scandal?
Are these retired military officials really just puppets of the Pentagon? Howard Kurtz takes a closer look for us.
CNN analyst Don Shepard, a retired general, said he never provided anyone's point of view but his own.
I feel no pressure whatsoever to do anything other than prevent my honest opinions about what's going on. I certainly did not feel compelled to carry any message to anybody.
But Kurtz didn't ask any of the obvious tough questions, like why so many of Shepard's CNN appearances seem to directly echo Pentagon-drafted talking points obtained by the Times. And there was no mention of CNN's previous record of collaboration with the Pentagon.
I went to the Pentagon myself several times before the war started, met with important people there and said, for instance, at CNN, here are the generals we're thinking of retaining to advise us on the air and off about the war, and we got a big thumbs up on all of them. That was important.
Now, this is a news story as of the last couple of weeks. This is the kind of thing that could have been in your book. Did you anticipate something like this or even ferret it out?
We have in the book one section on how many troops will be needed. And you have all these generals coming out, and first they say, oh, it's only going to be how many the first time?
Oh, less than 100,000.
Less than 100,000. And then every year they shamelessly go on, and no one goes back and calls them on it. We have another section on the costs of war, and all these generals come out, and Richard Pearl, the war will finance itself through the oil that this great country owns, so that we did not have the story of who was paying them to say this, but if whoever was paying them, they didn't get their money's worth because they kept changing their story and were never held accountable by the press.
So here's my last question. I think your book amply demonstrates that we couldn't tell the truth, even to ourselves, about the war in Iraq at the beginning. But can we do so even now, even after all that's been revealed?
Well, we hope that our book makes a point, if you read a couple of thousand quotes that are as silly as these in retrospect, that we might have allowed something to happen that we shouldn't. But I think people have wised up a bit.
But Christopher, you have to admit, you know, when someone as smart as Paul Wolfowitz, who was in the Defense Department, and then, you know, he's now not running things for an irrelevant reason, by the way.
At the World Bank.
When he was asked what he thought, he said, I wish that foreigners would stop interfering in the internal affairs of Iraq. This is what he's learned from it. So I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I wish that foreigners have stopped interfering. Just a minute. What are we in this thing? So people don't see the whole picture.
He's the guy who got the nickname Wolfowitz of Arabia.
Right.
Enough said. Victor Navasky, Christopher Cerf, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
This is Brian Lehrer Live, where web video meets the issues. Could free speech have helped save lives in the Burma cyclone? That cyclone, as you probably know, has killed at least tens of thousands of Burmese citizens. But could a better government have saved some? Here's a background report from the BBC.
For a country ruled by a repressive military junta and already suffering from widespread poverty, it was hard to imagine that life for the Burmese could get any worse. Now several 100,000 people are believed to be in urgent need of food, shelter and drinking water.
No electricity, very limited communication. Water is lacking in many neighborhoods. People on my compound that have been there for 15 years told me they had never seen anything like this here ever.
While the official images on state TV showed the military responding to the crisis, eyewitnesses gave a different account.
What strikes me, what I didn't see anybody from the military, anybody from the police, anybody from the fire force, and I think there is a lot of them otherwise. So people that I talked to were very surprised because it was private people cleaning up, it was monks out with machetes, but no militaries and no police. That struck me.
Where are the soldiers? Where are the military? I mean, so far they haven't appeared in Rangoon to actually assist in cleaning up the city and assist in providing any services, the distribution of food or water. The only groups, the level of organised groups that seem to be doing things are the Buddhist monks.
Let's follow up on that report. Let's check in with two guests in our studio. The Open Society Institute's Burma Project Director, Maureen Ong Twin, for an update on this latest crisis, and also get an update from CharityNavigator.org Vice President Sandra Minuti on how one goes about evaluating organizations that are giving aid to the region. Thank you both very much for coming in. There was a stat today given by a U.S. government official that's overwhelming. He said it's possible that 100,000 or more could be the ultimate death toll if things aren't handled right. Where does that number come from?
I think it comes from, I have a little map here. This is the Delta, the Burma Delta. About a third of all the population of Burma live there. And that's a five...
I'll tell you, why don't you hold that up just a little higher. We'll see if we can get a shot of it as you talk.
And that's the pathway of the cyclone, which, by the way, not only did India warn the generals that it was coming 48 hours before, I was watching it from my New York office, and I saw the cyclone inching up, and so the generals up in their
Burma, as we see, it's a coastal country, right? The Andaman Sea?
Andaman Sea, yeah.
And it's a very low-lying coastline, very vulnerable to
and
this
very
kind
populated, and by, poorer people. So you've got houses out of thatch and, very vulnerable to storms.
So this is why I asked the question at the beginning about information. Could a freer flow of information have helped to save people? Why wouldn't a government, even a repressive, murderous dictatorship like that of Myanmar or Burma, have notified their people about an impending cyclone?
Well, I don't want to second guess why they wouldn't even want to save their own citizens, but what I'm amazed at is they're still not doing it now. People who were not killed by the cyclone are dying every day because it's day 5, and they still haven't reached most of the delta areas that were hit. So we've got corpses floating, animals floating in the water. It's going to be epidemic soon if they don't clean it up, and they can't do it on their own. They've got to get international aid. So, but they would like to have the aid, the foreign aid, but without the foreigners. So that's going to be an interesting dilemma for them.
Which brings us to Charity Navigator. How can someone use your organization and your website to figure out which charities they should give money to that are being the most effective at actually getting stuff into the Burmese people?
Our site is kind of like the Consumer Reports for donors, so you can log on for free and check out the various charities and how they'll be spending your money.
And we're logging on right now. Is this your homepage?
That's right. We have some featured charities that are responding to the cyclone, and you can very easily click through. And all the groups that we're recommending right now, they all have our highest rating. They are incredibly efficient. They spend upwards of 90% of their budget on their programs. But I think the key piece for donors to keep in mind is to kind of do your research on the front end, because it will be years till we really know how effectively the money was spent, until we get information out of the region.
What does that mean? Do your research on the front end?
Find a charity that you're confident in. That
in general,
that has experience either in this region or doing this type of work and on this scope. I mean, this is a huge disaster. This is not the time necessarily to go with kind of a little bit of a more risky philanthropic approach and go with a new charity. You want to go with an established group.
So you want to give us some names for people who haven't gone to your website or may not be able to?
Save the Children is one of them, the United Nations Foundation, UNICEF, World Vision. There's a whole host of charities mounting a response.
Now, Maureen, the government, from what I've been hearing, is actually preventing some of the relief from getting through, including food. Is that your understanding?
Well, they're preventing the material, including food, to be distributed. There's big stockpiles of rice that the World Food Program has just sitting around. And
that's even before the cyclone, right?
Yeah, that's before, because there was already a food crisis. As you know, the price of rice went up.
And why would the government stop food from being distributed during a food crisis?
Because they want to distribute it. And you know, I saw the Myanmar TV, the state television, and the generals have figured out how to get good PR. You know, so the helicopter touches down, they come out of it, and they've got people bringing out rice and uniformed general, right? I don't know if he's general, colonel, whatever he is, handing out individual, like lunch packets, showing we're in charge, we're helping.
So maybe they're getting good PR there, unless they're in their own little bubble, which maybe they are. They are certainly not aware of the press they're getting around the world. In fact, in a rare press conference appearance this week, here is First Lady Laura Bush on the junta's response to the crisis.
As they cope with this tragedy, the men and women of Burma remain in the thoughts and prayers of many Americans. It's troubling that many of the Burmese people learned of this impending disaster only when foreign outlets such as Radio Free Asia and Voice of America sounded the alarm. Although they were aware of the threat, Burma's state-run media failed to issue a timely warning to citizens in the storm's path. The response to the cyclone is just the most recent example of the junta's failure to meet its people's basic needs.
Maybe I should be numb to something like that, because I've known for a long time how bad that government is. But I'm not. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted that they would withhold that information. At least Laura Bush's implication is they had it and they withheld it.
Yeah, they had it 2 days before, and as I said, I had it in my office in New York. But I'm going to get you even more, scarier story. Is we've got reports from inside. You can't call in, but people are, are emailing out. The junta's going around clearing trees in front of certain houses, giving water to certain people, their cronies or whatnot. So the fire truck comes in, and it only goes to one house, and everybody else is coming out saying, "Oh wow, we got water." No, they're not going to get any water. So, and they've got monks who are, cleaning up some trees, and the soldiers came and said, "We can't do this anymore," because the people, they don't want the monks to get any credit for helping.
Does CharityNavigator.org have a special section right now devoted to Burma because of the cyclone?
Yes, and we are also listing some tips to help people give in times like this. For example, giving to an established charity, designating your money for this particular cause if this is really what you want to support.
Now, how effective is that? That's something that I always wonder about. They give you these boxes on the form to check off, I want my money only to go to feed children in this village or whatever it is, and you think, yeah, it really goes into their general fund.
I think for most charities, they honor those requests. I think especially after what happened to the American Red Cross after September 11th, they got a lot of flack for their intentions to withhold some of the money they received for that crisis. So we've really moved to this pay-as-you-go natural disaster situation with charitable giving, which can hamstrung charities. But I think, you know, in times like this, as a donor, you want to give to that crisis, maybe not to other particular work that the charity does.
So in charity work, as in other kinds of work, this is the era of consumer choice.
That's right.
Let me go to your website's Hot Topics page. What are hot topics on Charity Navigator right now?
Right now, you won't see this particular crisis, but we are featuring it on our blog. But we have a hot topic about school choice, information about supporting the troops for those people who want to help the families of the military members, helping those hurt by the economic crisis right now, charities that are providing utility assistance programs, food banks. They're really suffering because of the economic crisis in America. So we're featuring those different types of charities.
Are people giving specifically for the cyclone right now? Are you monitoring that?
We are a little bit. I don't think we've seen the tremendous outpouring like we have for some of the other disasters. I think in part because a lot of the reports are showing that some of these aid groups are obviously having a hard time getting into the region. But I think as we see on TV some of the airplanes landing and the aid being delivered, I think more people will be apt to give.
Do you have preferred charities with your
I
familiarity with Burma, Myanmar?
Of course. We do. And I want to show the way we're dealing with it is, you know, all the big charities, the known charities, are going to get lots of money because everybody's just outraged and, you know, stunned by this. But we want to get into the small neighborhood groups and the small local groups who are not affiliated with any big organization. They're the ones who are really doing it. They're the cutting down the trees. And then, in fact, one of the residents said that the regime came and took pictures after they had, and probably using it, you know, to show how they've cut down the trees. Anyway, so we're, you know, recommending things like Avaz. I don't know if you know Avaz.org.
No.
It's an internet campaign. AVAAZ.org.
Okay.
It's a huge, several million member organization, and they're raising money for International Monks Organization of Burma.
So there's a political component as well.
There's a political, because they're going to use their networks to bypass the junta to help monasteries build up, because the monasteries are taking in all the destitute people.
Does Charity Navigator rate that one?
I don't believe we have that one.
They're not in office. You know, they're actually a cyber, what do you call, you know, a virtual
organization.
But they've got offices everywhere.
Well, is there a sort of wisdom of the crowds element to Charity Navigator? That is, in addition to the professional staff rating charities, do you also have comments pages where the givers themselves can, you know, rate and rank and vote things up to the top and all that?
Yes, on each charity's rating page you can also click to comment and see what other donors are saying, see what the charities may have said in response to their rating, learn more about their programs, all that goes on.
Do you find that the crowd matches up pretty well with the professional judgment?
Pretty well. The one thing that we did notice quite a lot is people are quite focused on the CEO compensation, and something that we try to educate donors on, you're better to invest in a charity that's fiscally efficient, that is delivering on its goals each year if they pay their CEO a decent salary, than one that maybe can't meet its goals each year but the CEO makes no salary. You know, you need to weigh the two, but I think it's something that a lot of donors have a hard time getting over.
Do you think this disaster seems real to people or just like another video from far away?
I think it's a little bit that we're starting to get burnt out after the tsunami and Katrina, so I think that's partly why we haven't seen the mass rush of giving. But we do know that the American public is concerned and does want to give, but I think we are feeling a little bit burnt out.
What do you want the United States government to do? I presume it's not to send FEMA.
Well, no, definitely not. The United States government's done about all it can. Actually, I would like, if I were king, right, I would like to have governments from around the world put pressure on the regime to accept international aid. Bernard Kouchner, you know, the foreign minister of France, has been trying to invoke the responsibility to protect doctrine that the UN has adopted, which if the government, your own government, is not protecting you, and in fact all these people are dying because you're not helping them, the international community, if they are instructed by the UN Security Council, can go in and say, okay, we're bringing ships, you know, here's the food, you know. So,
any websites you want people to go to as a takeaway?
Well, you can go to our website. We've got, you know, also, so that's Soros.org or Burma project.org. So Burma Project, one word.org. just because we're going to have our recommended charities, and we also will have a way, if you want to give to the local people that are not, and you won't get a tax write-off, but you know, you can do it through us or through Avaz.
By the way, another one of these local sort of sea-level events, should we be talking about climate change in this discussion, or is that a stretch?
Yeah, and mangrove destruction, by the way, and that's why all those people were vulnerable, because of global warming and because people, you know, are destroying the mangrove, which I guess they grow in the delta, you know, where the water comes in. Some of those mangrove places were protected during the tsunami, for example.
And charitynavigator.org, right?
Yes.
Thank you both very much. Coming up in a minute, Old Faithful, is it only for geezers? This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Today in America, 37 million people live in poverty. That's 1 in every 8 of us. But one city neighborhood found a recipe for hope by opening a restaurant where young people can learn the skills they need to find good jobs. Today, across America, 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. But one community found a way to give them safe passage out by guarding them on their way home from school and protecting their education. 1 in 10 families in America lives in poverty. But these farmers have opened the door to hope by joining together and earning a little more for all their hard work. With 37 million Americans in poverty, the need is great. But when we work together, the possibilities are even greater. We can change the picture of poverty to one of hope. Picture yourself as part of the solution. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
Do you want to complete your college degree while balancing career and family obligations? Do you want a flexible schedule and a challenging curriculum? If you've earned at least 30 credits or an associate degree, now's your chance to finish what you started at CUNY. Learn about CUNY's online baccalaureate in communication and culture. Visit cuny.edu/online or call 212-652-CUNY.
This past week, the video game Grand Theft Auto 4 was released, as you may know, to the tune of $500 million in sales. Maybe they got some of your money. Now, as much as that may be good for our retail economy, are there hidden costs of each of those consumers getting their money's worth? Here to discuss America's increasing tendency to replace real life with Second Life is Bryn Mawr Environmental Leadership Program Fellow Patricia Zaradic. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You have this concept that you call videophilia.
Yes.
Big word.
Big word. It came out of a paper that I and Oliver Pergams, my associate at the University of Illinois, wrote in 2006. And it was the first paper that identified a decline in national park visitation and then looked to explain it. So for 50 years, for as long as we'd been tracking national park visits from the mid-30s until the mid to late 80s, it had been on the rise in spite of recession, changing demographics, World War II, the rise of the interstate.
In fact, I would think that in a recession, that kind of vacation would go up. It's relatively cheap. You can camp out, that kind of thing. It's not Paris.
Absolutely. But the rise was really steady in spite of many kinds of cultural shifts until the late 80s. Then suddenly what we see is a decline. And this decline has continued until today, just as steady, just as sudden as you might imagine after the steady increase.
The late 80s.
The late 80s.
I'm trying to think, right? Because television started in the 50s. By the 60s, America was talking about how we're becoming a nation of idiots.
Yeah, yeah.
But the late 80s.
But
the
late 80s.
What do you think?
So what we looked at a whole bunch of different variables, everything that we could think of that might be potentially causal, everything from funding to national parks, median family income, number of vacation days. But the variables that stood out most strongly in their correlation and their significance was what we called videophilia. And that's the internet, video games, theater, going out to the movies, and home movies, Netflix, that kind of thing, and the price of oil. So there's here you can see a figure. If you look at...
what are we looking at? These are your graphs, right?
Yeah, these are our graphs from the paper. So in the bottom figure, that black line with the spikes in it up and down is the national park visits from 1939 until 2003, but the decline continues until 2007. As you can see, it's pretty much steadily rising with a few peaks and bumps until about 1988, and then we see this decline. Now, blown up at the top, in the black is the national park visits. In the red is a multiple linear regression model, so a statistical model that we created using those video variables and the price of oil. Basically, we could explain 97.5% of the decline and the vagaries, the ups and downs in the decline, using these videophilia, the rise in videophilia. So it looks like we're becoming a nation of great indoorsmen. And Grand Theft Auto, for example, is becoming way more compelling than the Grand Canyon.
There you go. Right. Or in academies, you can explain 97.5% of the decline with 95% certainty.
Yes, absolutely. That's quite accurate. And none of the other variables added significantly to that model. So television, foreign travel, ecotourism, wild outdoor adventures, as measured by extreme Appalachian Trail, hiking the whole trail. None of those things, price of, number of vacation days, added significantly to that model. So you can explain that all. If I could explain the stock market that well, I'd buy the studio for you.
So Grand Theft Auto is more popular than the Grand Canyon. You just stumbled onto that line, didn't you? That could be the title of your next paper.
Yes.
We are looking at a live webcam of Old Faithful right there.
Right.
So it still exists.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that we would like to do a little more research on. More and more...
there aren't a lot of people, by the way.
Yes,
a lot of geezers watching the geyser.
Yeah, and it seems like more and more people are accessing nature in this virtual way. And it's a grand experiment, actually, right now. We don't know what that effect is going to have ultimately, but in the last 20 years or so, it seems to be affecting us by reducing our inclination to go out into the real thing.
So what do we do about this?
Well, there's a number of different outreach strategies. Just recently, my collaborator, Oliver Perkins, and I were asked to present expert testimony to a subcommittee of Congress, an education subcommittee, in support of a grant called No Child Left Inside, which would mandate environmental education for K through 12 and provide some funds, hopefully at least, if it all makes it through Congress for...
But there's environmental education and there's environmental education,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Like telling people about global warming, for example, may be an important issue, but it's not going to get people into the outdoors necessarily.
Right. What we need is hands-on nature experience. In all the work that we did a review of different kinds of impact of nature on people, particularly for children and their development. And what we found was all the research points to actual hands-on experience with nature as being the primary cause of our relationship with nature. The more experience we have, well, I don't know, we haven't quantified how much it takes, but experiencing nature hands-on is the key to having environmental awareness, environmental sensitivity, that kind of stewardship initiative that it's going to take to address issues like global warming.
It may be stupid of me to even ask this question, but I'm going to ask it. Why should we care? I know people are saying, what do you mean, why? Of course we should. It's obvious. But if people are being responsible human beings, going to work, supporting their families, why should we really care if when they play on the Appalachian Trail or play online?
Well, one of the primary ways we're going to see our footprint on the planet is by being out in nature and seeing it. You know, I mean, we look at this disaster in Burma and we look at Katrina, and we look at issues like the polar ice caps melting. If we're out in nature more, we're likely to see more subtle changes than the grand-scale natural disasters and then be able to react to them in more reasonable, quicker ways.
So when you teach this stuff at Bryn Mawr, do you limit it to the classroom, or do you also go outside?
Well, when I teach it, wherever I teach it, I try to include going outside. in any aspect of it, because I really think it's that hands-on outdoor experience. I mean, one of the things that we noticed in our studies is that it appears that in reviewing the literature, that one of the aspects of having this virtual sensational nature available to us at any time is that we undervalue our local nature. So at the same time that you have access to this great, you know, webcam of whatever you need out in nature, you take tours of the parks, you wonder, how can my local nature possibly compete with, you know, watching some lion take down a...
Were you already here in the green room watching at the beginning of the hour when we had our video pic of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden cherry blossoms?
Yes.
Coming out in a time-lapse video. So we saw the whole two-week process.
Key, exactly.
Right, in 30 seconds. Were you cringing at that moment?
I was thinking, wow, well, I guess I don't have to go. No, I mean, some people are going to have that reaction. And I want to say that there are benefits to having virtual access to things. I mean, there's things that I would never get to see in person that I can see on the webcam. I'm never going to be at the bottom of the ocean. I can potentially see that on a webcam. I'm never going to be in an eagle's roost, you know, feeding the little egrets or eagles.
I don't think eagles feed egrets, but I get the idea.
But you know, I can see that on a webcam, or be in a beaver's den, or you know, be in the tropical rainforest. So
I'll close with my own story.
Okay.
I took my 2 kids with my wife to the rainforest in Costa Rica.
Wow, good for you.
This February. We really wanted them to see the rainforest before they grow up. And one of the most moving things to them was, of all things I never would have guessed, a sloth in a tree, barely moving.
Wow.
And they were captivated by it.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably not the sensational views they get on the virtual, but so real and so close.
And they'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Enough said. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's it for tonight's show. We are here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. You can sign up for our free podcast at CUNY.TV. Next week, bloggers from the Brooklyn Blog Fest. And please tune into my daily radio show, The Brian Lehrer Show, weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC Radio. Tomorrow morning, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. That's at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC. Have a great night.